Good evening and welcome to the channel's studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has made a speech at the Arab League summit asking for help to secure peace in his country.
I hope that most of us are here for the sake of peace and justice.
Zelensky made the appeal in Jeddah to Gulf states which have tried to remain neutral in the Ukraine conflict, despite Western pressure on Gulf oil producers to help isolate Russia. He said his priorities during the trip were to discuss Ukraine's peace formula for ending Russia's war, protection of the Muslim community in Ukraine, and the return of political prisoners from Crimea, which has been annexed by Russia. Meanwhile, Syria's President Bashar al-Assad has attended the Arab League summit for the first time since it was suspended from the regional body 12 years ago. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman here embracing the Syrian president. Mr. Assad was shunned by many fellow leaders after his government's violent crackdown on pro-democracy protests triggered a civil war in which 500,000 people have been killed. Syria was readmitted earlier this month. Meanwhile, leaders of the G7 nations are holding their annual meeting in Japan and have agreed new sanctions to starve what they call the Russian war machine. This is the moment the G7 leaders gathered on the final day of the summit to pose for a group family photo in front of the Itsu Kushima Shrine on Miyajima Island, which is just off the coast of Hiroshima. In a statement, the G7 nations demand that Russia immediately, completely and unconditionally withdraws its troops and military equipment from the entire internationally recognized territory of Ukraine. Ukraine's president will attend the summit on Sunday. The country's military rulers have said that at least 145 people are now known to have been killed in Myanmar by a powerful cyclone. They say most of the victims of Cyclone Mocha that made landfall last Sunday were from the Rohingya minority. The junta had earlier put the death toll at 21, but local residents say at least 40 had died. The UN have said around 800,000 people have been affected by one of the strongest storms to hit the region this century. A 95-year-old grandmother who Australian police tasered at an old people's home is in a critical condition as police said that the homicide squad will join a high-profile investigation into the incident. Claire Nowland, seen here skydiving years ago, was found by police outside her room holding a steak knife. 2 officers spoke with Nowland for several minutes, but when she failed to drop the knife and approach them, one fired a taser, knocking her to the ground.
Claire is 95 years old. She's about 5'2" and weighs all of 43 kilos. She can't walk on her own without a walking assistance. As they said, she had a walking frame or a wheelie walker. The use of a taser when a kind word was all she needed. If she was confused, which is what happens with people who have dementia, she needed kind words and assistance and help. She didn't need the force of the law, as it were.
A wildfire in the Spanish western region of Extremadura has ravaged as many as 3,700 acres and led to the evacuation of 550 people in the rural area. The commander of the military emergency unit said the fire is out of control and weather conditions are making the firefighters work particularly hard. About 200 to 250 firefighters are on the ground fighting the blaze in the area of the Caceres province near the border with Portugal. An unusually dry winter across parts of the south of the European continent and the long-term drought Spain suffers after 3 years of below-average rainfall has made the risk of severe wildfires rise in the country. And a rare 1929 Patek Philippe Calatrava watch owned by the last emperor of the Chinese Qing dynasty has hit the auction house with bidding starting at $1 million. The watch is a case study in how provenance and brand name trump condition when it comes to certain vintage watches. The original owner was Asin Gioro Puri, the last emperor of China. Only 7 Patek Philippe reference 96 complications like this were previously known. This is the 8th example to appear. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the channel's studios in Lagos.